In today's episode of Dead City, we finally get to Central Park, which has been set up in previous episodes as a sort of no man's land that's very dangerous, overrun with zombies, and even has animals from the zoo that was there. So we hear monkeys in this episode. I think we're going to get to see a bear later down the season. So hopefully they capitalize on that concept. But I always thought that the no man's land idea has a lot of potential. There's danger around every corner. And I thought that there was potential for the story here to stand out and be unique, or at least have something thrilling or scary in there. And we do get this interesting concept of the people that live here. They have their own sort of unique rituals that they undergo. We have this mystery hanging over the episode where Hershel sees this zombie that doesn't have a heart anymore, like a hole in the chest. We get to see the origins of that, and we get to see it manifest at the end of the episode with the ritual of somebody who died. So I thought that was a strong element of this episode, with a caveat we'll get to later down the road. But I love that mystery of seeing the zombies with holes in their chests. What does that mean? And then we get to see it at the end. So that part was pretty strong. I thought this concept of going to Central Park has a lot of potential. And so far, I love the locale. But the episode overall doesn't necessarily change my opinion on the season so far, which is, it's just kind of okay at this point. But it has potential to be greater. But a lot of this episode has to do with Hershel and his connection with Adama. We get flashbacks finally to see why he has such an affinity for this woman. She essentially played the good cop to the Croat's bad cop in this scene, where she's giving him what he wants. She's, giving him food, and she's giving him pencils and drawings, and she gives him a room later on, and she kind of plants the seed of, tension between him and his mother, and convinces him that he has to do things to help her down the road. So this is her manipulating him to do her will, and this is to explain why he lit the signal fire that let the Croat and all of them know that the attack was underway, that they were going to come across the river, even though they already knew that, but we talked about that last week. So these parts were important for the story, for sure. It doesn't get super deep into the psychology. It's kind of a lot of stuff that we probably already figured out on our own, but getting to see it definitely makes sense. But where this show falls apart to me is just like every villain group is doing really stupid stuff. So here we have New Babylon, who kind of forced Maggie into this position where she has to go back to New York City with them. And basically their plan is now, instead of just the exploratory mission, things went terribly wrong, and now we're just going to do the whole takeover, and we're going to take all this methane back, which makes no sense whatsoever. Like, they're going to get this one jug at a time if they're lucky. They're going to get all these gas jugs, and each of them is going to take out one, and how long is that going to last? Not long at all. Of course, the methane supply that we saw is these big vats, and it's the knowledge that is needed to produce this stuff. It's not just the methane that's there already. It's the fact that they're able to continue producing it that is relevant here. So just this whole, we're going to take the methane on our own. It just, no intimidation. They set up New Babylon as this kind of group that has very strict laws, and you should fear them because of the retribution. You're going to get hung if you have the slightest infraction. And that is setting them up to be this intimidating villain. And then you see their plan, like last week, where they just go across the river with this massive light, just announcing themselves. They didn't even need a signal fire to see that there was somebody coming across the river. Of course, they end up getting blown up, and they survive just by pure luck and happenstance. And now they're just going to do this whole mission on their own, which they didn't even plan for originally. So the villains, they're done for. There's no intimidation factor there. They have no logic or reasoning or planning ability. So I don't know. If the villains aren't clever, then it's really just not all that interesting to watch, to be honest with you. And it's just like, we're going to see how naive they are and how they're going to, just completely fail in their mission. And this lady is just so beyond stupid. I know they want us not to like her, but for a villain to work for me, I have to at least be able to respect that they have some idea what they're doing. So this is it's just so annoying at this point. And then they walk straight into this field, which is like just a death trap. I could tell you, somebody, seen a bunch of zombie movies, you don't want to go through that field. Could they go around? Is there another way? Why even continue on in the first place? And they're not equipped to do their mission. it's just asking for trouble. I did like this scene though. You know, it's a classic kind of horror movie scene, going through like cornfields or something, and people get sucked under by the zombies. People get separated. The scene in isolation is fine. It's just, you know, again, it's just adding to the stupidity of our protagonists even. So I don't know. And here we got the Croat and Negan, and I do kind of like their part of the episode too, where Negan's new goal is to turn the Croat against the Dama, to put a wedge between them in the same way that the Dama's putting a wedge between Hershel and Maggie. So he's kind of trying to do the same thing here. But some things here just don't work for me either, where, you know, they're riding in the car early on in this episode, and they're just basically teasing Negan, you know, rubbing it in that his friend died, and, you know, saying, oh, you had the soft spot for kids, I'll make sure to kill him for you. And like I said, you know, they're never going to get Negan on their side based on the end of the last episode. And, you know, if the Croat ends up falling for Negan's deception, that makes the Croat kind of dumb. And it also kind of makes Negan dumb that he thinks that this is going to work, you know? So I don't know. It's just something about this doesn't really work. I don't really see the Croat, you know, he starts to explain why the Dama is like so important to him. Like, she saved him and gave him a bunch of stuff, like what she did with Hershel, I guess. But I don't know. I have trouble understanding why he's under her thumb so much. I guess we might get to see that at some point. But I'm with Negan questioning that. But I don't know why Negan, you know, he got off on his own. Why not try to just leave New York City at this point? You know, maybe his real goal is to save Hershel still. I'm not really sure what his motivation is. But of course he wants to save his wife and child as well. But that would have been my goal, is like, I need to find where they're at. But anyways, you know, maybe it does make sense to try to go through the Croat to get what he wants, because he doesn't know where his wife is. But anyways, this group of people surviving in the Central Park here are kind of cool. I like their ritual, like I said. But they're also like hypocrites in a way, because the new people show up and they're like, oh, you're so noisy, we were able to watch you. And it's like, okay, but then the ritual at the end of the episode is them like loudly moaning when somebody dies, okay? So you're like introducing them with like, hey, noise is bad, don't be noisy, but here's our ritual where we habitually just make a bunch of noise that reveals our position. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh, we got eyes everywhere. It's like, they don't have technology though, so how do the people at a distance communicate? It seems like they all know where everybody else is right now. She's like, oh, we're out looking for the boy right now. So there would have had to be somebody who saw what happened to Hershel getting separated from the rest of the group, which is a little bit hard to believe when you look down at, you know, this area that's, you know, tall grasses you can't really see through. Who's distinguishing who from who is hard to do. But anyways, let's just assume they saw Hershel get separated and they're following him. So somebody had to see that happen and go look for Hershel. Somebody else had to see that happen and report back. Unless they're doing like Morse code or something. I'm overthinking it at this point, but the word travels really fast. And this is something they do in Walking Dead a lot, where like the fact that this world is massive and it's like a maze you get lost in. And then all of a sudden people just find each other on a dime. You know, Negan finds Hershel here. You know, everybody finds each other conveniently for the plot. Which makes the world feel small, and it makes this no man's land not feel as dangerous as it should, right? So that is one aspect here. I did like this scene with Negan going through these zombie arms crawling out, and he uses this, of course, as an opportunity to take out this other guy, which the other... It's just, like, why are they even going through here? Like, they could easily, like, once the zombie arms come out, it's like, all right, we're leaving now. Like, we're just gonna push through that. I don't know. This whole thing, it's a lot of stupidity going on, and it's hard to take kind of seriously when that happens. But, you know, of course we have the sidekick guy finding Hershel, the other girl from the group in here, the girl who dies at the end of the episode, she finds him. They bond over these drawings, a drawing of the city. And yeah, I don't know. It's just it's a lot of contrivances, right? And then of course we get this scene where Hershel misses Negan. He shoots a gun and just completely misses. Now I get what they're going for. Like, he's conflicted, he's angry, but he doesn't actually want to kill Negan. Like, he's in between. And in his indecision, he kind of accidentally pulls the trigger. but doesn't have the actual willingness to aim it properly. But it's going to be frustrating for people to watch. Just be like, yeah, okay, we know Negan's not going to die because he's first on the call sheet in this show, and he's one of the most important characters in Walking Dead right now. He's got that plot armor going on, and we already kind of had this in Walking Dead season 11 when he was a little kid with a gun pointed at Negan, so it's repetition. And it's just like, make up your mind, kid. Like, what do you want? Like, it's just an annoying scene to me. But I understand what they were going for, to show the conflict within him. But I don't think this scene really landed, at least not for me. And then, you know, Negan does the Batman thing and he disappears, which is kind of fun. But other than that, I don't know. I'm mixed on this scene. Let me know what you guys think. But here's a part of the episode I do appreciate, which is, you know, he's looking out at the city, and it's kind of like a Rorschach test, right? Where what you see in the city says more about you than it does about the city. So I like this aspect of it, that he's looking out at it and he projects himself onto it, and he feels like, oh, he tells his mother at the end of the episode, you know, it's the island that was abandoned, that was left behind. And he feels like that because Maggie is so obsessed with all these terrible things that have happened to them, especially with Negan. And he feels neglected because, you know, she's all preoccupied with that stuff and his needs are kind of not acknowledged, you know. So I like that part of the episode, and definitely, you know, the symbolism of the art I think is cool for his character. But yeah, I still don't feel an attachment to this character per se, but I respect what they're trying to do. And we have this ritual here, and I like it from a cinematic perspective. I do have an issue with the noise situation that I mentioned already. And there's also the fact that, like, they're doing something that's very brutal, and she's still kind of alive, right? They just full out refuse, like, here's free medical supplies. And I get, like, the symbolism that they want to be on their own. They don't want to be with this other group. That's all fine. But, like, it's just bandages and shit. Like, just take it. Like, what is wrong with taking that? They could have saved this girl potentially. You know, it looked like she got infected or something. So probably not. I mean, it is perfectly realistic in this situation that she wouldn't survive that injury. But, you know, they didn't even really try is the thing. And then now they're just, like, thrusting something into her chest while she's still alive. She doesn't scream, you know, and that, again, it's noise. They're just making, oh, which I like cinematically, but it just clashes with how they're introduced. So, I don't know. It was a cool scene, though, like, pulling out the heart. It was brutal, though. They made it look way too easy. Like, you would have to really dig in there, and she would have to be screaming. Like, it would have to be a lot more brutal for it to really have that same impact. And to the point where, like, if I was in that room, I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, stop, don't do that. Like, I don't know, guys. But anyways, it was gross. I did appreciate the concept. And here comes Negan coming back, and the Croat's just immediately suspicious. So I don't know that Negan's plan to manipulate is going to work. But now he's got rid of the Croat's right-hand man, so Negan's trying to position himself, you know, which all that makes sense to me. And now we have that heart-to-heart, and then we see kind of the end of the episode where the Dama says you have things to do. And now we have to find out if he already did that with the signal, or if he still has to do that. Like, does she want him to kill Maggie or something? Not really sure. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm kind of like still at that, you know, 6 out of 10. It might even lower to a 5 if it keeps going at the same level. Like, I need to see some, you know, ramping up of tension and stuff. The predictability is still a factor here with, you know, the Negan part of the storyline. I knew it was going to happen right away. Also, she seemed a little, the girl who was sacrificed or whatever, seems a little too aged. You know, like, as far as the zombie makeup goes, like, it wasn't fresh enough. You know, she was still, looks very, very dead. But anyways, that's a nitpick. That doesn't really matter that much. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Hope to see you guys there. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out.